Now I'd like to introduce Dave McCaffrey, and he will introduce our guest of honor this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. What a crazy couple months it's been here in Lethbridge. I see many familiar faces from the meetings that have been called over the past couple months. And last October, when our community started meeting on this, Golden Key Oil had planned to be in the ground here in Lethbridge by April. And we don't know what's going to happen quite yet, but we know that they won't be in the ground by April. So around this tremendous result has happened on the back of a lot of community support. Tonight we're going to hear from a woman who did it on her own. She went by herself. Jessica Ernst has, I was going to do a more lengthy bio, but I was asked to keep it short and sweet. So without further ado, we're about to hear the story of a woman who worked as a scientist in the oil and gas industry for 30 years, got fracked, the town's water tower blew up, and she's suing them all. Without further ado, Jessica Ernst.
That's perfect. You keep that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, it's a long talk. Thank you all for coming. It's a grueling talk. I never understand why anybody wants to hear this presentation. You will understand the title as I go through the story, In Bad Faith. These people will get nowhere. I was invited to come by No Drilling Lethbridge. I'm very tired. I have been saying no to talk, so I was not going to come. I said no, and Laurie Chin persistently, politely, and gently kept asking. So she's the reason I'm here tonight. A few of the players in my story. Encana, after we served the legal papers on Encana, they split off into Synovus. I believe that was to protect their oil riches. We cover both companies in the statement of claim. The energy regulator, they keep changing names, like a jack-in-the-box. Energy Resources Conservation Board is what they used to be called. They must have done something, and the government changed them to the Utility Board after they were caught breaking the law and spying on innocent Albertans. The government changed their name back to the Resources Conservation Board. And then after my lawsuit went public, they've now changed it to the Alberta Energy Regulator. They now have legal immunity from failing to protect us, our water, and doing their jobs. And they also now have complete control of all of Alberta's fresh water. Alberta Environmental Protection used to be the protector of Alberta's water. They too keep changing names. This is done to confuse us. Every time something really bad happens, the government quickly changes their names so that good, dutiful Albertans will vote for the government again, and they keep doing that, Albertans. I have the red for Alberta Environment because for most of my story, that's what they were. And they too now, of course, are going to be under the Alberta Energy Regulator. What's new under the new regulator is that our fresh water now can no longer be sued. So you can't sue the regulator of fresh water in Alberta anymore. What is fracking? Does anybody here not know? So I don't have to say it. What's important about knowing what fracking is, in their statement of defense, Encana, of course, is now claiming they didn't frack my community, and I'll talk about that later on. In my community, they're fracking everything. Verticals, horizontals, deviated, shallow, into the water table, deep, mid-range. Some of the wells they're mixing all up. Our research council got involved, and they too changed names after they wrote some very shoddy reports dismissing the water contamination cases in Alberta. When they were the research council, on their website they boasted proudly that they were meeting the priorities of industry. In 1985, there was an explosion in Los Angeles at the Dress for Less department store. 23 people were seriously injured. This is methane burning through the parking lot. Explosion may be tied to abandoned oil field. The fire chief said, This burning of the gas may take months for it to burn off. They threw together a very quick task force. There was a class action lawsuit. Unfortunately, it settled out of court with a gag order, so we don't know the details. But they blamed bacteria. Biogenic. And they went even further. They said the rising water table pushed the gas up into the department store where it ignited and caused the explosion. Some researchers in Saskatchewan did some baseline testing. I consider this very important baseline, about 1,000 water wells and springs. Most of the samples had no detectable methane, and the few that did had very low levels. Everywhere that they are doing the new brute force fracking, people's water is getting contaminated with methane, and they're blaming bacteria, just like they have done with all of us in Alberta with contaminated water. Some historic records in my community: gas present, yes or no? No. On a neighbor's well, my well, a county well. This is the records here. You can see the Alberta Environment logo at the top. 1986, I blew up the important part. These records, in around 2010, the government pulled these records and changed them and put them back with the gas present, yes or no blank. My legal team looked at 2,300 such records. Only 4 had a gas present that could have been methane. That's in around 50 square kilometers of my place before the shallow fracking experiments began. That's less than 1%. How many times have we heard the lie, the big lie? There's never been a documented case of fracking contaminating groundwater. I've heard it 1,000 times. I've probably read it 1,000 times. Better than that, when I first went public, Alberta Environment and the Alberta Energy Regulator, they said there's never been a documented case of any water contamination by the oil and gas industry anywhere, by anything they've ever done. Well, we just heard in the news up at Edson, 5 water wells contaminated with an industrial solvent by the natural gas industry, sulfolane. There's been many, many cases. It's a big lie. Kaiser was found to have contaminated water and a water well, and they want to frack Calgary. And there were many, many cases that were signed by gag orders, reportedly. I will not sign a gag order with my lawsuit. I'm doing the lawsuit for water. I'm doing the lawsuit because fracking is so bad. So I'm making everything about the lawsuit public. If you keep doing that, we're going to be here till midnight. So in 1993, Husky did some research. Congratulations, girls, on those great posters. Fantastic work. They did a big research project on gas migration because it was a big problem. They concluded they can't really fix it, even when they try, and it's very expensive to fix. They already knew in the 90s that the industry had contaminated groundwater. They defined gas migration. When I went to Newfoundland, the people there said, oh, but they want to frack oil wells, so we don't have a gas migration problem. Their regulators were telling the people that. It's not true. Oil wells will leak methane just as badly, sometimes worse. And they want to do oil here. So you have a good chance that you're going to have gas migration. And they very rarely know the pathway. This is a diagram showing what they knew in the 90s. Here's showing the leakage coming outside the well and here through it. 46% of the wells they tested were leaking, had gas migration. The United States Geological Survey did a big study. There were many water wells that were contaminated in the States from coal bed methane and fracking. They had a big class action lawsuit, another one. They settled, they signed gag orders, so we don't have the details. But Chafin did a remarkable paper. He did not find bacteria to blame. He did not find nature to blame. He found energy wellbores to blame. And they put him in the back closet. They treated him terribly for his good service to the public. Our big oil and gas lobby group, CAP, they too studied it, multi-year study. I purchased this research from them. They even titled their paper, Migration of Methane into Groundwater. 1995, 96. And in 2006, our regulators were telling Albertans that there had never been a case of groundwater ever by the oil and gas industry. They did the same thing my legal team did. They looked at 24,000 records. Actually, Alberta Environment did it. They asked the regulator to do it. Before oil and gas development, less than 0.1% had gas present. After oil and gas development, the exact same percentage that my legal team found. This is all before the experimental fracking. This is the data from their report. Before oil and gas development and after, these are the water wells that had gas reportedly in them. A 5-year-old can see the difference. They said that this is a very useful data as water used in the region for dissolved methane. Yes, methane is found naturally in water wells, usually at very low levels. Usually it does not dramatically change. And what they found in their study, most of them had less than 0.5 milligrams per liter. I'll remind you of this later on. And the 2 highest were just over 1 milligram. Very important baseline data. I bought my property in 1998. That's the Rosebud River. I love beauty. I love Alberta's big sky. It's my garden. 15 years later, researchers took a look at the task force on the explosion at the Dress for Less in Los Angeles. They said this was imaginative, troublesome legal issues eliminated, unscientific, happy, blameless ending. Isn't that wonderful? The implication being that the methane hazard could exist virtually anywhere and nobody could be held accountable. No Alberta Health Services, no Alberta Energy Regulator, no Alberta Environment, no Encana, no Golden Key. Beautiful setup. Hutchinson, Kansas, 2001. First responders had a heck of a time putting these explosions out. They traveled underground the next day, 3 miles, killing 2 people. This was the water there. Trican and Husky in 2002 did a peer-reviewed paper on the problem. This was their rate of leakage in the wells they looked at. 80%, that's a lot. Our ministers of the environment in Canada held a workshop in 2002 and said unconventional natural gas drilling poses a real threat to groundwater quality and quantity. It's one thing to have your water go bad. It's another thing to lose your water altogether, which is happening to people. And we need baseline hydrogeological investigations. We've got contamination cases, community-wide contamination in Alberta. We do not have this yet. And Encana didn't care. They started experimenting in my community in 2001 in secret. These wells were all fractured where the freshwater zones are. I've heard your PR people from Golden Key tell you, don't worry about your water because we're going to frack way, way, way down there. Well, when they did finally consult with us, that's what they told us too. We got the same lies. In 2001, they perforated at 100.5 meters below the surface. That is evil. It's pure evil. They didn't even warn the pregnant women or the families to protect their children and at least say, well, we're going to experiment with your water supply, so maybe you better not bathe your babies in this water. In 2004, they perforated and fractured right directly into the aquifers that supply my community and my water well. The stop sign shows legal land descriptions for Encana wells. That's how little regard they have for our safety in our school buses. They don't bother putting in a post to properly designate their wells. My fracked life began with noise. Most of what I'm telling you in this presentation I did not find out until years later. But what I began noticing was a lot of noise. Backup beepers, construction noise, compressor noise, flaring, incredible amount of noise, very stressful and extremely disruptive to life. But my neighbor came to me and said, Jess, you better get your water well tested because my water well went bad when Encana did some wells nearby and they want to do more and I want the money, so get your well tested. I did, lucky for me. I called Encana, I said I want a water well test. I didn't want to say no because I didn't want to take the money away from my neighbor. They needed access on my land. They came and tested my water. In 2003, it poured clear, and the tester did not report visible gas. This is the data. I blew up the important part for you. And on the data, it says Encana. In 2003, a report by the Research Council admitted that natural migration of methane is rare in Alberta. That's why they have to frack. The methane doesn't want to let go by itself. They have to force the methane to let go. It's tightly adsorbed to these unconventional plays. Maurice Dussault, he's at the University of Waterloo, researcher. Leaking methane gas from thousands of wells poses massive environmental problems, changes the aquifers. Encana landman, when he signed me up, I asked questions about CBM, coal bed methane. I asked about fracking. I was worried about the water because we knew about all the contamination that had happened in America. The politicians were saying, no, 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 don't worry because we have best in the world regulations. We will never let happen to you here in Alberta what happened to the Americans. And the landman said to me, they'll never frack at Rosebud because the gas escaped years ago. Back to Coleman. They did serious investigations there. And they found that industries leaking gas caused those explosions, extensive damages, and killed those 2 people. And the gas had migrated almost 7 miles. Los Angeles, more research, peer-reviewed papers, which the regulators ignore. They owe a duty. They do owe a public duty. And they're ignoring this stuff. Corrosion and leaks in the well casing caused that explosion. Industries leaking gas seriously injured those 23 people. No, it was not bacteria, and it was not the rising water table. This is Encana's data on the well they fracked our aquifers with. It's an incredible impact when they do the unconventionals. They have to frack many, many zones. These are 24 zones that they perforated holes in the casing that they promise us protects our groundwater. But they don't tell us that they blast all these holes in the casing, because they need these holes with which to then inject their frack fluids. And then notice here they say fractured. And that wasn't just enough. That's the data on the energy regulator. This is the data on Alberta's water well database. They admitted that they were going to perforate to get CBM out of our aquifer, to frack our aquifer. 121.5 meters below the surface. And repeatedly, they fracked our aquifer. A manager with the regulator said shallow operations can be high risk, but they don't tell us that publicly. These are private little things that they tell water labs and companies. This is a hydrogeological report that was done for Encana when the first water wells went bad in my community. These are the first wells that went bad. I'm over here, my water well. This is a gas well. The water wells are getting their water from here. These are Encana's fracks. And we still do not know what chemicals were injected. Encana promises they only frack with nitrogen, pure as the air we breathe. I've got FOIP data that talks about 50-50 oil cuts and naphthalene range and kerosene and petroleum distillates and all kinds of stuff. But they're not providing the information, and neither did the regulators. So water wells started to go bad. Encana investigates itself, which I think should be made illegal all around the world. When do you ever have a bank robber go to the RCMP and say, give me the fingerprinting kit, I'll do it myself? And they blamed our local water well driller. He was so upset, he quit because he did a lot of water testing for Encana. Encana landman was going around lying to my community with a strange document, and the farmers began to get suspicious. And they came to me because I was working for Encana up north at the time, and they said, Jess, is this document legit? I said, let me look. And people in the hamlet also looked, or also came asking for help. It was in violation of Guide 56. There was a manager's phone number on it, so I said, I'll call the guy. I'm working for them up north. I'm sure we can set this straight. So I phoned him, told him, you need to tell the community what you're doing. They were trying to get a blanket approval because these wells, Golden Key wants to do 3 now. And how many more tomorrow? And how many more after that? And then when the experiments go bad, because it's an experiment, then they have to come back and do more and more and more. my community, we are still being fracked. So this manager says to me, Jess, no, wink, wink. We're on the phone, wink, wink. If we get them to sign all this document, we don't have to consult. I said, wait a minute, I'm working for you up north, doing consultation work for you in those communities for your upcoming project. And you don't want to consult with my community? So we have quite a chat. Finally, he agrees we'll do an open house, and the very next week, the landman is back, the same landman with the same regulation violating document. So I went for a very long walk with my dogs, and I knew I had to resign. It was a very serious day because I knew, without really knowing, that my life was never going to be, I would never get my life back. And Encana finally holds an open house. By the way, the day after I quit, one of the managers on the project was trying to figure out how to fire me. Because there's good people there. I had people phone me saying, whoa, Jess, you just created turmoil all the way to Gwyn Morgan at the top. Because I don't think anyone had ever resigned before. And I did finish my project for them. I didn't leave them in the lurch. And I didn't charge them because I had resigned. But I said, too late. You can't fire someone who's already quit. So at this open house, they promised us what they have promised you. We will only be far below your water table, far below the impermeable layer to protect your water. And then they did what I call another evil thing. They gave a little bit of money, it's a tiny bit of money, to one tiny part of the community, and this is to divide and conquer. This is to get anger and betrayal and jealousy, and it's incredibly brilliant. It works every time. And I have never seen a community where it doesn't work in Alberta, except you, I think, are showing me the first. Because I don't believe you will allow it to happen. If they offer you the money, in Nova Scotia, I presented about a donation Encana had done to the Drumheller Library. And in the Q&A, a woman got up very upset, and she said, I work at the Library Association, and Encana just gave us $50,000, and we took it. So I said, give it back. We can't, because we've had so many cutbacks. We need the money. So what? Give the money back. Say no. Say, you take that $50,000, and you... you get Sean and Ronald E. Campbell and their cattle water. You get the Hawkwoods water. You take that money and you protect your own. Don't you come here and bribe us with corrupt money. So if they come with the money, but I don't think they will, I think they're afraid of you. But say no. Go to your council, talk to your politicians and say no. Put it in writing, put it in letters to the editor. Create your own community constitution. Sure, it's not going to be legally binding in a courtroom, but you create your own constitution, put it on real, you got great artists in this community, get the children to help. Write in your constitution, we will not take Synergy Alberta, and we will not take bribes. We will stand united. So our water tower blew up a little while later, as you heard in the introduction. This is really serious. The water manager got very hurt. He was in the hospital. Investigators said accumulation of gases appears to have caused this. Encana fracked the aquifer. Fracking, the purpose of fracking is to force methane to let go. Methane that doesn't want to let go. This is the old water tower here. And this is the new, the red barn. I don't know red barns that have a roof, and I have to look at this thing. I hate this thing. The water reservoir is underground. Encana promised the community 1 part, 150,000. This cost almost 700,000. They are still paying for this. The hydrogeological report. My water dramatically changed. I can't go through all the things that happened. But my water well turned into a better gas well. It sounded like a train coming in my house because there was so much pressure it would force water taps open. Shh, all night long. It drove me crazy. I started to notice that I didn't do dishes anymore, but I was getting incredibly painful, deep cracks on the top of my hands that wouldn't heal. So negative feedback. I thought, well, I didn't know. Just doing the dishes kind of hurt. And It wasn't until one day I poured fresh well water for my dogs and they backed away from it in revulsion. And suddenly I knew they've been lying to us. They've been fracking. And I have a corporation. I have my own environmental firm, and it's my due diligence. So I started to research and try to get data. And in Alberta, that's very hard. This is my water after fracking. Remember the 2003 data by Encana, water appearance clear. I had some colleagues who worked on the gas migration study. They came and looked at my water. They said, this is extremely serious. You better get it tested. So I did. They taught me how to do it. The noise continues. I sent evidence of Encana's non-compliance to the regulator, and the regulator decided to try to change the noise control directive to match Encana's non-compliance. Living rurally or in a beautiful city like Lethbridge with 5 decibels more industrial noise is a lot. I don't have time to go into the noise. This presentation is one tiny part of what I'm living. So I sent off an email warning people, hit send. I was on my way to the Yukon to talk to First Nations up there on fracking. And I came home to a letter from the regulator and I thought, oh yes, they've told Encana to stop the noise. And I opened the letter and my neighbor was with me and they banished me. I have instructed my staff to have nothing further to do with you. I have no energy, regulator. Shame. But you know what's worse? You know what is the worst shame? We're letting this happen. Why do we not have 1,000 people pounding on the regulator's door? How dare you? Do we? Oh yeah, no. I'm not talking about Lethbridge. I'm talking downtown Calgary. Yeah. And I'll get to you guys later, don't worry. So here's the letter. They copied the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They copied their surveillance branch. You know they broke the law spying on people. They got caught. And their security. This was to intimidate me. I didn't know yet Encana had fracked the aquifers. This was to stop me doing what I was doing, digging, research. I'm a scientist. And I wrote a letter asking for clarification under what law can you judge somebody guilty without a trial. And this is how serious they took the banishment. I sent it registered, signature required, and the address to the ERCB goes there. They refused my mail. And this ended up in my mailbox on the same day that this was on the front page of the Edmonton Journal, because a reporter up there had heard me, had read some quotes of mine during the tour in the Yukon and wanted to meet me. So they came down, cameraman, and on the day they came, the results came from the lab. And I had dangerous levels of methane in my water. And so the regulator came out with a little sort of a bit of a PR spin directive, best in the world, to put everyone back to sleep, and it worked, because people were getting upset. They only do something when there's press, bad press. What's important about this directive, though, is that they admitted in writing that industry had damaged oil field wells with shallow fracks and that they didn't really know what they do. I went public with this. They pulled this directive off. They removed these statements and put an altered directive back up. I've saved the original. Most of these documents that I talk about that vanish, I've uploaded to my website. So the government promised us safe alternate water now and into the future, regardless of whether the methane is created by bacteria or nature or whatever. They knew they had failed us. And they finally come to test. They knew 2.5 years previous, they knew what Encana had done. Alberta Health knew. You had Dr. Brent Friesen here, promise you the world. We beseeched him. He just deflected us like we were dead flies. And he will do the same to you. So will all the rest of them at Alberta Health. They'll promise you everything. Alberta Environment knew. The ERCB knew. So they come and test, and they look around. They're very alarmed by my well and by the amount of gas. And Al Strauss, he's retired now. He looks around, he says, you don't have cattle? No, I have no cattle. Well, you caused the problem. You caused the methane contamination because you don't use enough water because you don't run cattle. They hadn't even filled the sample containers yet. This is best in the world, Alberta, science. And you're a university, so you could do something about that. Write a paper, get a PhD student. And a few days later, we have a meeting with the Minister of Environment, who was Guy Baudelaire at the time, and all his staff, hydrogeologist and deputy minister, assistant deputy minister, and they told us we were to blame because we used too much water. I lived alone with 2 little dogs. Now, this is my water well. This is where the water tower blew up. The black, I don't know if you can see these little circles. These are all conventional wells or deeper unconventional wells. This is about 6 miles to my place. I chose a radius of 6 miles because of the 7 miles that the gas migrated at Hutchinson. And the red, the solid dots, Encana fracked less than 200 meters below the surface. These circles, all the red, they fracked above the basic groundwater protection. So where the fresh water is, without telling us, and without the mandated baseline testing that came into place April 2006. This is just from 2001 for the red dots. The black, of course, are older and newer, till April 2006, and they are still fracking the hell out of us. So you think of the pressure rising and the gas rising to surface. This is a propaganda thing by the regulator. And they show here the beautiful shale well just way deep down here. But these are shales. They have the right to frack these. And they are. They show a shallow coal bed methane well here. This is the basic groundwater protection. And they show the fracking below. They don't show the fracking into the water zone where the water wells are. And then they show this perfect casing to protect our water, but of course they don't show all the perforations, the holes in the casing. And the government knew. They had done some tests on some water wells. They can fingerprint gases, find out where they're coming from. And they knew that Encana was likely the guilty party. Already in 2006, I had to use freedom of information to get this. I didn't get it till 2 years later. They never told the community. They still haven't. Some of the chemicals. Oh, by the way, these slides I will put on my website, so you will have access to these. I don't have time to go through everything, but lots of chemicals. Benzene's a known carcinogen. Toluene damages the brain, especially in children. Toluene's used a lot in the industry. Hexavalent chromium was found by the government in a monitoring well. They didn't tell the community. And people wonder why so many people hate me, because I'm bearer of such bad news. Some of the chemicals found in my water, the chromium went up by a factor of 45 after Encana fracked the aquifer that supplies my well. Evidence of petroleum distillates, alcohol, phthalates. The same phthalates that the regulator found in Diana Downheimer's water. She's suing Bellatrix for $13 million. It's starting. The revolution is starting. This is how they treat us in our communities. This is in the pouring rain, my community. This is the Bruce Jack water. Does it remind you of Hutchinson's water? Can you see the water? Can you see? Is it dark enough for you guys? Do you want less lights? Will the camera guys get mad? Can we turn down? Yeah, can we get? This is his, oh, you can't even see the well. This is his water shooting out of his water well down here. And the company put in a professional venting system to vent the methane out of his water. He tried for 2 years to get, oh, thank you so much.
Oh, hey.
Oh, I like that. Can you turn the light off on me too? By the way, this is really great.
You like that?
I was going to use a handheld, but this gentleman here convinced me to use the rock and roll thing here. It's pretty good. I'm probably going to walk out with it and take it home. So you'll hear me talking to myself. Bruce tried really hard. And the regulator came, they had more wells to be fracked. He wanted to object, and the ERCB dared say to him, they were EUB at the time, you can't use contaminated well water as a basis to object to more fracking. So finally, he did get 2 industry gas and water testers to come to test the gases, and this is what happened. The methane ignited. This is dangerous, it's life-threatening. That's his water well. Do you see his well? You don't see the professional venting system, it kind of vanished. That's the well. Oh, That's Bruce. The lights are worse. Dark in the front and you can have the lights at the back. Sorry, can we have some more adjustments here? Bruce was in the hospital for a month. The two these are professional testers of gas in water. They were also seriously injured. Bruce had to sell his herd. Is that better? This is incredibly painful to be burned. He could have been killed. The day before, a little 8-year-old girl was in front of the door. So back to Rosebud. Kevin Pilger, 20 years experience, lead investigator for our case. We're having a kitchen table meeting. In my community, it was the women that did the talking. So there was 3 women. And the regulator and his assistant. And I said to him, look, Encana fracked the aquifers. They fracked, I didn't know how many they had fracked shallow. I had received data from colleagues sending me the evidence. And I said to him, they fracked the aquifers. And I said, why don't you ask Encana for their perf and frack data? No, we can't do that. Why? That's why. Encana promised. They promised they didn't do all those red dots. They promised. That's what they hinged their investigation on. They never did look into those wells. So I said, okay, well, forget Encana's data. Go to the regulator. No, we can't go to the regulator because you broke in and you changed all of Encana's data. So this is me after fracking. It's pretty good when you get fracked. So maybe you should talk to Golden Key. Have them pay for your new arena or your water slide or whatever it is. You're getting some great new water thing, right? Aren't you getting a sports thing or something? Arena. Oh, leisure center. Won't there be water there? Oh, maybe there will be no water then. So you will have a leisure center with no water. Think about that. So here's the regulator, and I scaled these walls, and of course I had to call Schlumberger and Halliburton and CalFrac and CWS and Trican, and I called all the boys. I said, you guys bring those nitrogen queens, the big ones, filled with whiteout, because I got a lot of Encana data I got to change in one night, all by myself. So I was horrified. My neighbor, this was witnessed by a journalist and neighbors. They couldn't believe this. So I thought, okay, forget the ERCB. Read the hydrogeological report that was done. It admits Encana fracked our aquifers. No, we can't read it because you fabricated it. You made it up. I made it up. But it's got professionals, it's got professional seal, it's got signatures. You forged them. Best in the world. Science. And Craig Nouse came, my water started producing this white stuff, and he said, we can't test that. We don't have the budget. We wanted a safety protocol because Bruce Jack had been seriously injured during testing of his gases in his water. We were about to get our water tested. I didn't want liability of my place blowing up, or me, or even Kevin Pilger defaming me. I didn't want him to blow up. Craig says, no, we don't need to do a safety protocol because I can feel when your water is contaminated. This is what we have. Remember the CAP study and the Saskatchewan study? The 2 highest there by the big oil and gas lobby group, just over 1. There was a peer-reviewed paper in 2008 that thinks we have 3 times this because of shoddy sampling by our best-in-the-world government. My historic data, gas present, no. There was a briefing note by the Research Council in 2006, long before they were involved, saying that we were not going to like it when they blame bacteria and us. But Encana's fracking the methane made by bacteria. They don't tell us that. They're fracking that shallow. They're fracking the biogenic methane. Their documents even admit it. So back to my banishment. Now, this is the most important part of my lawsuit because the regulator in writing infringed on my charter rights. How many of you people here value your constitutional rights? Yeah, I do a lot. So now the regulator had to come to try to get evidence after the fact. And they tried to get me to admit to crimes I had not committed. They wanted to know about all the bombs I have in my barn. And I said, the only bomb I have in my barn is my water well. And they wanted to find out what it would take. He was a bully. That's him. You see, you recognize him? That's Rick McKee. He got fired. That's me. It was a very scary, very, very, very scary time. I still have nightmares. It's a very long, horrible, horrible meeting. And he tried to find out what it would take to get me to leave Alberta. I said, you do your jobs, and I will leave Alberta and never come back. I will be so happy to leave. I'm still here. But he admitted on tape. I learned by now I didn't trust anybody anymore, so I asked if I could tape record the meeting. He said yes. And he admitted that they never considered me a threat. So they banished me all for a big show to scare me into nice, obedient Alberta silence. They had a water chemistry study. They've even found in their own study most of the water wells in coal, no methane. All of the industry shallow coal bed methane wells had biogenic methane. This is a serious worldwide problem. They created a great big network. They meet regularly. They don't know how to fix it. And they now want to come in and compound this incredibly dangerous gas migration problem by fracking and fracking and fracking the wells again and again and perfing and perfing and perfing. Testimony to parliamentary committee, the big oil and gas lobby group. Oh, if we find methane in water, we presume it's natural. Best in the world science, again. The government decides to do monitoring wells to get baseline data. Finally, 6 years too late. So here's the water well. They never did get any water. They only got methane and ethane. This is the handle for the lid. I went to have a look, and it was going like this. I called a colleague. I told him what I saw, and he said, back up really slow. Hang up and call me later. Back up really slow. Don't spew any gravel. That could blow. We called 911. They did this right near. It was right in the hamlet of Rosebud. They didn't tell anybody. Kevin Pilger and the Research Council were in charge of this. Friday afternoon, they probably wanted a couple of beers. They didn't even flag it. They didn't even tell the volunteer fire department. And they had to cap it. It's illegal to let a well vent gas like that in Alberta. Toddlers. I wouldn't want children to experience what Bruce Jack experienced. And like everything else by our regulators in Alberta, they covered it up. So they did two wells. This is the bad one. This is the gas well. Should be a water well. I think they did that because of me taking pictures. But I think this is even more powerful now. What are they hiding under there? So the government finally commits to a comprehensive investigation. They switched labs. The lab detected the ethane in our water but did not bother analyzing it. They already knew it matched Encana's. This is comparing the ethane fingerprints in the Rosebud water with the chemistry study by the regulator. They're almost identical. Just the ranges there. Some of the ways they know the leaking is happening. They now know that the shallow zones are higher potential for leakage. That's where the biogenic methane is. Many ways of the gas migrating. They now know it's worse than what they thought in the 90s. They retain, the regulator did this shoddy investigation. They retain the Research Council to do an investigation. Or sorry, not an investigation, to review the investigation only on the cases in the media. And they didn't talk about the conflict of interest. The Research Council was being paid by the regulator and Encana on CBM and water research. They ignored the historic record on my well that said gas present no. They ignored Encana's test on my well. And they claimed that there were other water wells that had methane, and so mine was natural, or I was a dirty water well owner. And they still couldn't explain where the methane came from, but they dismissed the cases. Instead of using the damming data, they used data from wells 100 miles away to claim no match. They were fracked much deeper. We did a media alert saying, no, we object to this. And on the very same day, Encana donated $7.5 million to the University of Alberta. The University of Alberta is the lab that indicated match of the fingerprints. They take away our water. This is going to be a hard chapter for me, so please forgive me. This is Rosedale. Oh, I'll have some water. I hate going to get water. We live in Canada. Damn it. All my life, I figured we had unlimited water. I never, ever, ever thought I would be hauling water. I pay. I don't mind paying. My little dog died in November, and this case has been terrible on my loved ones. He had to bear my stress. And the first year we went public, he was in kennel 2.5 months in a year, and I never did that to him or his brother before. So when you say no, do so with conviction and pride. You're Albertans. You have the right to say no. You have the right to protect your loved ones. You have the right to protect your university, your schools, your city council, your donut shops, your newspapers, your bridge, your leisure center that's going to have good water. Because my loved ones suffered. So we're back home. There's that new water tower. Had to give up my laundry room. We served the legal papers. And then W5 did a very short segment on me and a bunch of other Albertans with contamination. I wasn't the only one. And the very next, it was Saturday night, that next Monday, I get a phone call from one lead guy from Harper's anti-terrorist squad. And I start laughing. And he says, "This is very serious. Why are you laughing?" I said, "Well, because, did you see the news on Saturday night? Did you watch W5? No." "Well, I'm laughing because you're phoning. It's obvious why you're phoning." Well, I caught him in a lie within the first half hour. He said that they wanted me to train the 43 constables in Harper's anti-terrorist squad just for the oil and gas industry in Alberta. Because I'm so good with landowners, he said. They trust you in Alberta. Well, that's not why they came. They came to intimidate me. So my lawyers and I, we talked to them. My lawyer said, "Don't you go to her. She's had enough. We'll come to you." But they came. Here they are. This is my living room window. Actually, it's funny. They couldn't even make it up the road, and it's just like an incline like this. They had to back up and do it again. I got photographs, right? Ting, ting, ting. The car is going this way and this way. This is my back door. And at this point, the lead fellow, he hears my camera. And he says, "You can't take our photo. We're undercover." I think we have to write Prime Minister Harper and tell him these guys need nice little white fuzzies for the winter time and green ones in the summer. I said, "Yes, I can. You're trespassing." And I gave them my phone and said, "You phone my lawyers." And they said, "No, I'll use my phone." "No, you won't. I want a record. I want long distance record that you called." They had no warrant. So if it was natural, if bacteria did it, would they send the RCMP? I'm a pretty feeble middle-aged woman with 2 little dogs. Prime Minister Harper appoints Neil Whitman Chief Justice, Court of Queen's Bench. This will make sense later. The BC regulator put out a safety advisory because they were now having deep fracks blowing out the way they had shallow fracks blowing out here. And the industry admitted they don't know what their deep fracks do. It's an experiment. Encana buys the community's silence. This is 2010. 6 years later, they gave the promised money. And most of the people, it worked very well, most of the people in the community want more money. But the coolest thing is that there are people now in the community supporting the lawsuit, attending in court. Yeah, it's amazing. The hearing in January, I believe there were 12 people from Rosebud there. That's incredible, because I think it would take an awful lot of courage for them to go, even more courage for them than me. Deep and shallow shales will be fracked, and it's a risk. This is in a regulator report. My lawsuit goes public. A big, important peer-reviewed paper came out just days later. They've now quantified the amount of methane near drilled and frack sites. Harper government appoints Justice Barbara Veltois. Both these justices became involved in my case. How many of you know about the Grand Prairie incident? Gas frac was doing a propane frac, and they accidentally perforated holes where the fresh water is. You remember all those red dots? Encana intentionally fracked our water. These guys did it by accident. And the regulators knew about this. And then they did their frac, deep frac, but the frac fluids, 40,000 liters of propane and whatever chemicals they used to gel it, shot into the freshwater aquifers. The regulators lied to us for over a year. Encana's website, no documented cases of groundwater contamination from fracking. Instead of improving the regulations like they promise us, they are deregulating. They've removed all the limits on Crown land and private land in Alberta for unconventionals. I've already been fracked, as I was so beautifully introduced. I got fracked. Here's Encana drilling down and then on an angle under my land. This is my land here. These are all wells. There's the noisy compressors. They don't stop. I wrote concerns to the regulator about the waste. Encana has a document that says they're going to frack the fish scale shales. They're radioactive. So where are they going to put the waste? Fracking produces an incredible amount of waste. The regulator wrote me and said, don't worry, they will not dump the waste adjacent to your land. These white trucks are hauling the waste, or collecting the waste. Here's my land. So they went a mile over. This is food land. This is our bread. I was on the other side of the river with a photographer, just happened to see this. Encana did a study here in your neighboring Suffield on their frac fluids and their drilling waste. Barium, mercury, arsenic, chromium, more, BTEX. I've only put a bit, there's not enough time. Encana's document says that they work this in right away to prevent harmful effects. When the wind blows, it dries and becomes airborne and we breathe it. They didn't work it in. The ground was frozen. The Innisfail frac blowout, do you know about this one? A farmer came home and there was a suspended oil well here and he saw fluids shooting out of it. So he called the emergency response line at the regulator and they didn't answer the phone. So he called a surface rights group. He had to run to find the frac crew. They didn't even know they had lost pressure or had a problem. They were still fracking away. And he had to make them shut it down. The fluids were dripping off those trees, the Red Deer River's on the other side. Those workers do not know what they are cleaning up. And they're having a close look here. So our first court hearing, I can't believe it was almost 2 years ago, and the judge offers volunteers to become case manager. We accept. She said this was to push things along faster. It's a complex case. What I'm learning is it's to make things go backwards. And she asked for a shorter statement of claim. I agreed. I said, okay. The regulator demands that my original statement of claim get removed, not just from the public record, my website, but also from the courthouse. This is how arrogant the regulator is. That's a legal filing. Lois Frank, standing tall. Constitutional rights. We have the right to say no. We have the right to protest. We need to start fighting to defending our rights. The Crown stayed the charges. Why? Because they had no case. An EU report, a very good one, 25 to 100% of frac water is lost permanently. It's very different from the water we use to brush our teeth and cook with and irrigate with and fill our leisure centers. That water goes around and around. This water does not. Who is going to pay for the road damages? You will. We did. They destroyed our roads at Rosebud. There's a new paper just came out today, I believe. There's been a peer-reviewed study got published on the incredible amount of money the fracking is causing damages to roads and the taxpayers are paying. There's a case management phone call, and the defendants want to move my case to Calgary. The harm occurred in Rosebud. The legal area where the courthouse where it belongs is in Drumheller. Alberta Environment said, I have transcripts, said on the call, it tips in the defendant's favor to move it to Calgary. So our case management judge said, Well, the Chief Justice said it's supposed to be in Drumheller, and Encana says, the lawyers say we won't drive there if it's in Drumheller. This is their office in Drumheller. It's huge, and at the back in the parking lot, there's all kinds of vehicles. But they will come with big trucks and drill and frack and dump their waste. And 2 lawyers will not go into a little car to go to court. Do you see a regulator? I don't see a regulator. This is where they frack the aquifers up there. That's not compliant. This is the lock end. The people there are being pounded with toxic air and traffic and damages. But the amazing thing that's happening there, big VPs and CEOs in the oil and gas industry are getting fracked within a few hundred meters of their multi-million-dollar homes. And they're upset. I was at a meeting in Cochrane, December 2012, I believe it was, and a litigation lawyer stood up nearly in tears because he could not get the frack company to baseline test his water well. This is my community. This is our cemetery at Rosebud. They don't respect the dead. This is Encana drilling under my land all night long. So you have to hold your breath while you're sleeping. And finally, the ERCB does another PR thing. They come out with this big bogus draft frack regulations to make people believe they're going to regulate fracking now. And this is what they allow. They came into force in the summer last year. All the red lines, I've added those. So they can do all this stuff, but they can also frack all where the fresh water is. And the only wells that they have to do baseline testing for is coal bed methane up here. They don't have to do baseline testing for this coal or shale wells tested up or fracked up here or sand wells. CAP has said they will voluntarily test another well fracking above the basic groundwater protection. They can drive out and do this, but they won't go to court. Drive to Drumheller, I mean. So the report comes out on the Innisfail blowout. Fracking was to blame. No fines, no punishments. The gas frack in Grand Prairie, yes, it contaminated groundwater. No fines, no punishments. The hearing in January last year, Calgary court was packed. I'm still, to this day, stunned by the support. And I know some of you here were there. I thank you. Encana argued nothing in court. This is the day of the hearing. This was actually taken a couple days later, but the day I went, the day of the hearing, it was too dark to take a photo. There was a rig, and then this was the next rig. So the best in the world regulator, and this is what you can expect. They argued, no duty of care, that they can gross negligence, they can treat you in bad faith, deliberate acts. What would a deliberate act be? They can violate my charter rights because I'm a terrorist. They put that in their legal filing, which my lawyers tell me is extremely bad. They have absolutely no evidence. They didn't fingerprint me. I was never charged. I was never thrown in jail. I'm not even a protester. I don't do protests. I'm too busy reading. I'm too busy doing their jobs. Alberta Environment argued to have the word contamination taken out of my statement of claim and all the other paragraphs about the contaminated water wells in my community. I did not attend my own court hearing. Why? It cost me a lot of money. I believe we have to make a stand, strong stand. It was wrong of the Chief Justice to move the case to Calgary. So I had a witness. I didn't even tell my best friends because I knew nobody could know. We attended in the waiting room all day. Little Magic was in the truck. I asked permission from the court clerks. I said to them, we can sit in the truck, but we'd sure prefer to be here. Why? Aren't you Ernst versus Encana? You're supposed to be in Calgary right now. What are you doing here? I said, well, actually, I'm here because I'm supposed to be here. The case belongs here. And she said, well, it's a public building. Of course you can sit here. Can we use the washrooms, water fountain? Yes. The media later reported that I was specially treated with videoing of the court proceedings, which is a lie. I knew nothing of what was going on. I did not even know the courtroom was packed. My lawyers were supposed to call me at noon to give me an update, and they forgot, because they were so excited about the packed courtroom. They completely forgot about me, the plaintiff. Take a stand. Use your imaginations. Our imaginations are infinite, and they are our most powerful and fantastic asset we have, and this was free. I don't even have a protest sign. I have no button. And then a little while later, the Prime Minister, Harper government, appoints the judge on my case, promotes her to Court of Appeal. My lawyers said, "Don't worry, Jess, she will still rule." In the next case management call, she said, "Nope, that's not an option." And in that case management call, Neil Whitman, whom the Harper government had also appointed, Chief Justice, volunteers. How do you say no to something like that? Chief Justice wants my case. And your university honored him, announced he was going to get an honorary degree. This is Alberta. This is Alberta. And then we have Gerard Proddy. You saw him driving the big steamroller there in the cartoon, which I can't believe that I'm in a cartoon. That is one of the greatest things. And when I saw that cartoon, I couldn't believe it. And when it got published, do you have any idea how fantastic your media is here? Do you thank them? Thank you. Lethbridge Heralds. I used to do kind of read papers, scientific papers, right? My habit now, because of you guys, every morning, the very first thing I do is I go to the Lethbridge Herald, have my coffee, read all these. I go, oh, there can't be more than 3 letter after letter, and another article, comments. It's fantastic. So he's now the head of our regulator. I'm still hauling water. And Encana filed statement of defense, and this, they say that they didn't frack, but this is their data. It says fractured. They're now saying, no, we didn't frack. They put this in their legal statement of defense. They said, we stimulated. Sounds a little sweeter, a little more tempting. Kaiser, Calgary. Oil and gas people don't want to be fracked. What do they know that we don't? 200 people protested in the pouring rain. Albertans don't like rain. Not in Calgary anyways. They hide when it rains. Does that sound familiar? We were promised, you were promised, I'm not urban. Where's the urban drilling policy? And the urban drilling policy has gone from a policy to a task force to a round table. And you know what round tables are? Synergy. That is to divide and conquer. Round tables are to come and they will promise a little bit here and a little bit there, and they'll get you at a nice round table, so you will all start fighting and to divide you. Finally, the Chief Justice rules. He grants the regulator total legal immunity, even for emissions. He does say, though, in his ruling, that the regulator had absolutely no evidence to rule me a terrorist. But he grants them complete legal immunity even for violating my charter rights. The charter trumps all. We had a fantastic thing happen on Friday with our Supreme Court. Let's thank the Supreme Court. Absolutely fantastic. I've been sitting waiting for that decision for a long time because it grossly affects my case. All of us. My case affects you. Because I think they were using my lawsuit to try to chip away at the charter. But he writes in there that I have a valid charter claim. But he says, to prevent all of you putting on your charter clothes and suing the ERCB for violating your charter rights, he ruled against me. Now, I don't know what charter clothes look like. We have an artist. What do you think, what do charter clothes look like? Did I get a good, like there's the Constitution, right? And the reason I chose armor was because your Lethbridge Herald had a great little article about the Supreme Court ruling on Friday where they put this, the second point about the 5 important points about the decision, constitutional armor. So they've gone from charter clothes to armor, and I think the Canadian press put that in their article because of my lawsuit and the charter clothes. Yeah, I think so. So let's thank the Canadian press. Contamination stays, the other contaminated water well paragraphs stay, allowing my case against the government to proceed. This is my water, it's not Photoshop. Encana filed nothing. Don't forget, this is not the trial. This is just preliminary motions to bankrupt me, to exhaust me, to kill my heart, kill my spirit, make sure all my loved ones are dead. I just hope I can live long enough to last this lawsuit. Texas, oil-soaked Texas. This is Alberta's cousin. Dallas votes to ban fracking. Let's thank Dallas. And because you're doing so much clapping, you're the reason I'm going over time. It's not my fault. Do the camera guys get paid overtime? And here we go again. Here we go again. The Alberta government, Alberta Environment, they want another hearing. They said to the judge, now we want to get rid of her entire case. He just said to them, you can't remove the word contamination, and you can't remove the other paragraphs. Now they want to strike out my whole claim, copying the ERCB. But Chief Justice moved my case back to Drumheller. Wow. Wow. You know, even if I never get anywhere further than that, I have won 4,000%. And all it takes is to stand. Take a stand, take a friend with you, believe in your stand. I was very uncomfortable to do that. We appealed the justice's ruling. Our appeal is May 8th, and the appeal factum is on the lawsuit page of my website. I recommend it. It's an incredible read. My lawyers did a remarkable job there. I find reading legal documents impossible. I call it legal mumbo jumbo. I'm a scientist. I don't understand legal writing, but they make all of our documents simple for anyone to understand. They get 45 minutes to argue. And on the 18th of February, the government filed their application to strike my case, arguing no duty of care, immunity. This is the water protector. This is the government. That's what they think of you. That's what you get to look forward to.
We are elected officials. We are accountable to our communities. The Alberta Energy Regulator is accountable to no one. They're appointed, and you know, I understand the role that they play, but really the public doesn't have confidence in them, and if they make a decision that the public doesn't agree with, there's no real method of appeal.
The only way you will protect Lethbridge and your loved ones, I've lost my loved ones. If you still value yours and you have your loved ones and your children and your health and your families and your parks, I love Lethbridge, it's beautiful. You keep them out. That's the only way you will protect. Oil-soaked California, Bakersfield. I mean, California is where the industry started, for goodness sake. 10-0. Los Angeles, where the dress for less exploded because of industries leaking gas. What a story. I almost fell off my chair when I read that. The power of no. The power of no. Do you understand what you're doing? Do you understand what you've given me? I never thought I would see what you are doing, what Lethbridge is doing, your city council, your school boards, your university board. I never thought I would see that in my lifetime in Alberta. Never, and you are doing it. And the world is watching you closely. You have no. You have children saying no, 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 no. And dogs? The dog, well, I don't see the dogs. The cartoonist, can we file a complaint with the cartoonist? All right, we're going to quickly draw a dog. There's the dog, yeah. Take the dogs, yeah, absolutely. This is a part of one of the cartoons. This is my favorite of all of the cartoons because this completely captures the spirit of you. No. And you're doing it politely, with imagination, integrity, strength, courage, conviction, you name it. And you have unity. Even in your differing views and viewpoints and opinions, you have unity. And that gives you power, infinite power that you can rely on that forever. Have compassion for each other. They will try to divide you. Don't let them. And I will end with this. You can look forward to this. This is Craig Knauss, who was the fellow who said Alberta Environment didn't have the budget to test for the white stuff, nitrogen in my water, the gases. In a meeting with witnesses, he said, he brought it up himself. He said, on Albertans asking Alberta Environment for help because of fracking, apparently just in the Loch End area, they have a backlist of 400 complaints. And he said, these people, you, me, us, will get nowhere. So I would like, yes, wow, gleeful animation. Let's prove him wrong. Thank you. Hey, you guys.